Good morning. It's time for our daily lectionary reading for Sunday, July 25th. It's going to be a little longer because the Sundays add extra. Um, there's actually 4 readings on the Sundays instead of the 3 that we have most days of the week. So what do we have for today? We have Psalm 14. It's our last day in this psalm, the denunciation of godlessness. Then we have 2 Samuel 11, 1 to 15. Ephesians 3, 14 to 21 as our epistle, New Testament epistle. And so, on Sundays, we had a New Testament epistle and a gospel. And our gospel reading today is John 6, 1 to 21. So let's get started with Psalm 14, the denunciation of godlessness. Fools say in their hearts, there is no God. They are corrupt. They do abominable deeds. There is no one who does good. The Lord looks down from heaven on humankind to see if there are any who are wise, who seek after God. They have all gone astray. They are all alike perverse. There is no one who does good. No, not one. Have they no knowledge, all the evildoers who eat up my people as they eat bread and do not call upon the Lord? There they shall be in great terror, for God is with the company of the righteous. You would confound the plans of the poor, but the Lord is their refuge. Oh, that deliverance from Israel would come from Zion. When the Lord restores the fortunes of his people, Jacob will rejoice. Israel will be glad. All righty, our Old Testament is 2 Samuel 11, 1 to 15. One of the more disturbing stories in the Bible. And this will be my sermon text for this morning. Try not to give too much away of my sermon in my commentary here. So, it's David and Bathsheba. In the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab with his officers and all Israel with him. They ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained at Jerusalem. Now it happened late one afternoon, when David rose from his couch and was walking about on the roof of the king's house, that he saw from the roof a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. Please note, the woman was not on the roof. David was on the roof, which would have been higher than anything else, right? King's palace. The temple is the only thing higher. So David is on the roof looking down, and he sees a woman. David sent someone to inquire about the woman. It was reported, this is Bathsheba, daughter of Eliam, wife of Uriah the Hittite. So David sent messengers to get her, messengers plural, and she came to him, and he lay with her. Now she was purifying herself after her period. Then she returned to her house. The woman conceived, then she sent and told David, I am pregnant. Custom, Jewish law, said that 1 week after her menstrual cycle, a woman would purify herself. She would bathe. She would take it's called a mikvah. They would immerse themselves as a cleanliness ritual. It's not physical cleanliness. It's not that kind of bath. It's not a soap and water, and it's a cleanliness ritual to make them spiritually clean. Men would also undertake a mikvah to become spiritually clean before they could enter the temple to worship. So women were to, observant Jewish women were to go to the mikvah, to have a mikvah, to cleanse themselves spiritually after 1 week after their period. Well, if you know your physiology, that puts them in prime conception. That's a prime fertility time, is 1 week after the period, which is why that's kind of important. But it also leads us to why David, the common belief, I've heard this many times, and you see it in depictions. There's a famous movie from 1961, I think it is, that Bathsheba was on her roof bathing, and she knew men would be looking at her. No, She was cleansing herself from as a ritual cleansing from her after her cycle. David was being a peeping Tom and he saw a beautiful woman coming out of the mikveh. Maybe he could see into it through a courtyard because he was up high. She was not on the roof. She had no expectation of anyone seeing her. She was being an observant Jew and doing what was expected of her. All right, so David sent word to Joab, send me Uriah the Hittite. Pause, word about Uriah. David, I mentioned this the other day in one of the videos. David had the mighty three, the three they called them, capitalized the three of his mightiest warriors. And then he had, they called them the 30, even though there's 37 names, were some of his mightiest warriors, right? These were like the cream of the crop, his commandos, if you will. They did all these wonderful deeds in David's name. Uriah was one of those 30. This is not someone David didn't know. This was not some nameless guy in David's army. It was one of the 30, which meant he was well respected. The fact that they mentioned her Bathsheba's father's name meant he was well respected, which is why they lived close to the palace. But I think we really need to keep in mind with this story that this is not some faceless guy that he doesn't know. This is one of his trusted warriors, Uriah the Hittite. And Joab sent Uriah to David. And when Uriah came to him, David asked how Joab and the people fared and how the war was going. That was the pretense for having him brought before David. And then David said to Uriah, go down to your house and wash your feet, which is a bit of a euphemism. Yes, there's a literal washing your feet. They wore sandals, they've been on the road, but washing your feet, uncovering the feet, that's kind of a euphemism for grown-up stuff. Uriah went out of the king's house, and there followed him a present from the king. But Uriah slept at the entrance to the king's house with all the servants of his lord and did not go down to his house. When they told David Uriah did not go down to his house, David said to Uriah, you have just come from a journey. Why do you not go down to your house? And Uriah said to David, the ark and Israel and Judah remain in booths, in tents. And my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are camping in the open field. Shall I then go to my house and eat and drink and lie with my wife? As you live, and as to your soul lives, I will not do such a thing. See, the reason David wanted him to send him for him in the first place, if you haven't picked up on this, is he wanted Uriah to go sleep with Bathsheba so then they could pass David's illegitimate child off as Uriah's child. It's a cover-up. David's trying to attempt a cover-up for his own sin. But Uriah says, my men are sleeping in tents and sleeping rough. The army of Israel is out in the field sleeping in tents, and I should take some comfort? No, I'm not going to do that. That wouldn't be right to my men. And then David said to Uriah, remain here today also, and tomorrow I will send you back. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day. On the next day, David invited him to eat and drink in his presence and made him drunk. And in the evening, he went out to lie on his couch with the servants of his Lord. But he did not go down to his house. So David, since Uriah wouldn't go down his own, David got him drunk thinking he would go down, and he still didn't. So in the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. And in the letter he wrote, set Uriah in the forefront of the hardest fighting, and then draw back from him so that he may be struck down and die. The cover-up didn't work, so now David wants Uriah dead. I'm not sure what he's hoping to accomplish by having Uriah killed, other than it's an actual betrayal of one of his most trusted soldiers. And the indignity of it all is he's sending the letter by Uriah's own hand. There's so much in it. And tomorrow, I'm not sure it's tomorrow. Might be next. It's next week's lectionary passage. We get the second half of this story. This is really only half. Um, Again, this is my sermon text. We're going to talk about this. So let's go on to Ephesians 3:14-21. For this reason, I bow my knees before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth takes its name. I pray that, according to the riches of his glory, he may grant that you be strengthened in your inner being with power through his Spirit, and that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith as you are being rooted and grounded in love. I pray that you have the power to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth and length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge, so that you may be filled with the fullness of God. Now, to him who by the power at work within us, get rid of those noises. Now, to him who by the power of at work within us is able to accomplish abundantly far more than all we can ask or imagine, to him be the glory in the church and in Christ Jesus to all generations forever and ever. Amen. And in John 6, you remember the other day, the readings we had where that we were actually in Mark and we skipped the feeding of the 5,000. We did the before and the after, but we missed this feeding of the 5,000. Well, now we get the feeding of the 5,000, but we get John's version of it. John 6, 1-21. And after this, Jesus went onto the other side of the Sea of Galilee, also called the Sea of Tiberias. A large crowd kept following him because they saw the signs that he was doing for the sick, saw that he was healing them. Jesus went up the mountain and sat down there with his disciples. Now the Passover, the festival of the Jews, was near. When he looked up and saw a large crowd coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread for these people to eat?" And he said this to test him, for he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 6 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each of them to get a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are they among so many people?" And Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." Now there was a great deal of grass in that place, so they sat down, about 5,000 in all. And then Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated, so also the fish, as much as they wanted. When they were satisfied, he told his disciples, "Gather up the fragments left over so that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up, and from the fragments of the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten, they filled 12 baskets. And when the people saw the sign that he had done, they began to say, "This is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world." When Jesus realized they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain by himself. When evening came, his disciples went down to the sea and got into a boat and started across the sea to Capernaum. It was now dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. The sea became rough because a strong wind was blowing. And when they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and coming near the boat, and they were terrified. But he said to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." And then they wanted to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the land towards which they were going. One little quick thing here before I let you go for today. The "it is I" in verse 20, but he said to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." The actual grammar of that, the Greek grammar is "I am," which is the same as the Hebrew when God talked to Moses on Mount Sinai, the burning bush. I am. That's what he gave his name as. I am. So we've got this parallel, and we lose it in English translations because when they translate the Greek, they say it is I. But it's actually there's a carryover, there's a connection back to the burning bush. All right, that's all I've got for you today. Hopefully, I will see you in service today, and we'll talk a lot more about David and Bathsheba. I'm going to talk a lot more about David and Bathsheba. Bye.